In a fog-draped London flat, Hercule Poirot faces a chilling challenge. A daughter's plea to clear her mother, convicted of poisoning her artist husband 16 years ago. 5 witnesses, a little pig from a haunting nursery rhyme hold. Fragments of the truth. Was it the betrayed wife, Caroline, or the radiant mistress, Elsa, who laced the beer with deadly cognac? As Poirot unravels their tangled memories of love, jealousy, and betrayal, a shocking confession reveals a truth. Buried in the shadows of Alderbury's garden, can justice prevail when time has hidden the killer's hand? Chapter 1. A ghost from the past. The late autumn light filtered through the heavy curtains of Hercule Poirot's London flat, casting a soft glow on the polished mahogany desk where he sat, his small, precise hands arranging a stack of correspondence with meticulous care. The room was a study in order, books aligned perfectly on their shelves, a silver cigarette case gleaming beside a single porcelain cup of steaming tisane. His mustache, a masterpiece of symmetry, twitched slightly as he read a letter, his sharp green eyes narrowing with interest. The quiet was broken by a knock at the door, firm yet hesitant, as if the visitor were unsure of their welcome. "Entrez," Poirot called, his voice carrying the faint lilt of his Belgian origins. The door opened to reveal a young woman, perhaps 21, with dark, expressive eyes and a determined set to her jaw. She wore a tailored coat, its deep burgundy a stark contrast to her pale complexion, and her gloved hands clutched a small leather satchel. Poirot rose, gesturing to a chair with a courtly bow. "Mademoiselle, I am Hercule Poirot. You are, I presume, Miss Carla la Marchant?" She nodded, seating herself with a grace that belied the tension in her posture. "Yes, Monsieur Poirot. I've come about a matter of great importance. It concerns my mother." Her voice, though steady, carried a tremor of emotion, like a tightly strung violin. Poirot leaned forward, his fingers steepled. "Proceed, mademoiselle. I am all attention." Carla's gaze met his, unflinching. 16 years ago, my mother, Caroline Crale, was convicted of murdering my father, Amias Crale. He was poisoned at our home, Alderbury. I was 5 years old, sent away to Canada to live with relatives. I grew up believing her guilty, as the world did, but now— She paused, her fingers tightening on the satchel. "I've received a letter she wrote before her death in prison, insisting she was innocent. I believe her, Monsieur Poirot. I need you to prove it." Poirot's eyes gleamed with the spark of a challenge. A case 16 years cold, its evidence scattered, its witnesses dispersed. Such a puzzle was irresistible to his orderly mind. "Mademoiselle, the past is a shadow that clings stubbornly to the present. But tell me, why now? What has stirred this need to revisit such pain?" Carla opened her satchel, producing a folded letter, its edges worn from handling. "This arrived on my 21st birthday, from my mother's solicitor. She wrote it for me, to be delivered when I came of age. She says she loved my father, despite his betrayals. She begs me to believe she could never have harmed him. I can't ignore her words, Monsieur Poirot. They haunt me." Poirot took the letter, his fingers brushing the paper with reverence. He read silently, noting the elegant, desperate script of a woman facing her end. Caroline Crale's words were simple yet profound, a plea for her daughter's faith. He returned the letter, his expression softening. "Very well, mademoiselle. Hercule Poirot will undertake this task. But I must warn you, the truth may be a bitter fruit. Are you prepared for what I may uncover?" Carla's chin lifted. "I want the truth, whatever it is. My mother deserves justice, even if it comes too late." Poirot nodded, his mind already turning to the logistics of such an investigation. "Then we begin with those who were present at the time of the crime. You must tell me of the players in this tragedy." Carla leaned forward, her voice steadying as she recounted the household at Alderbury in the summer of 1926. There was Amia's Crale. Her father, a brilliant but reckless painter, consumed by his art and his passions. Caroline, her mother, a woman of quiet strength, strained by her husband's infidelity. Elsa Greer, the young radiant mistress, who had captivated Amias as the subject of his final painting. Philip Blake, Amias's devoted friend, a stockbroker, with a sharp tongue. His brother, Meredith Blake, a reclusive chemist who lived nearby and dabbled in herbal potions. Angela Warren, Caroline's teenage half-sister, fiercely loyal and quick-tempered. And Miss Williams, Angela's governess, a woman of stern principles and keen observation. They were all there when it happened, Carla said. The police said my mother poisoned my father's beer with cognac, a poison from Meredith's laboratory. Her fingerprints were on the bottle. The trial was swift, the verdict unanimous. But I can't believe she did it. Poirot's fingers tapped lightly on the desk, a rhythm to his thoughts. 5 witnesses, 5 perspectives, like the nursery rhyme, Nest pas. This little piggy went to market, this little piggy stayed home. Each will have their tale, and in those tales we shall find the truth. I will need to speak with them, mademoiselle. Can you arrange this? Carla nodded. I've tracked them down. Philip is in London, Meredith in the country. Elsa is now Lady Didisham, married to a peer. Angela is an archaeologist, often abroad, but she's in England now. Miss Williams is retired, living quietly. I'll contact them, if you'll take the case. I have already taken it, Poirot said, a faint smile curling beneath his mustache. The little grey cells, they are already at work. Provide me with their addresses, and I shall begin my inquiries. We will meet again when I have heard their stories. Carla rose, relief softening her features. Thank you, Monsieur Poirot. I knew you were the only one who could help. As she departed, Poirot stood by the window, watching her figure disappear into the fog. The case of Caroline Crale was a tapestry of human passions, love, jealousy, betrayal woven tightly around a single act of violence. He would unravel it, thread by thread, until the truth lay bare. His little grey cells hummed with anticipation. For Hercule Poirot thrived on the impossible, and this, he sensed, was a puzzle worthy of his genius. Chapter 2. The Canvas of Memory. The London fog clung to the streets like a conspirator's cloak as Hercule Poirot's taxi wound its way toward the Gentlemen's Club in St. James's, where Philip Blake, the first of the 5 witnesses, awaited. The detective adjusted his silk scarf, his sharp green eyes scanning the passing city through the window. The case of Caroline Crale, 16 years dormant, had ignited his curiosity, a flame that burned brighter with each new challenge. Philip Blake, described by Carla Lamarchant as Amias Crale's closest friend, was the first thread in the tapestry of that fateful summer at Alderbury. Poirot knew that memory, like a painting, could be vivid yet deceptive, its colors shifting with time and motive. He would listen, observe, and peel back the layers of Philip's account with the precision of a surgeon. The club was a bastion of old-world masculinity, its oak-paneled walls, steeped in the scent of cigar smoke and aged leather. A porter stiff as a tin soldier led Poirot through a labyrinth of hushed corridors to a private room where Philip Blake sat by a roaring fire. He was a broad-shouldered man in his late 50s. His once ruddy complexion faded to a sallow hue, his hair a thinning silver. His suit, impeccably tailored, spoke of wealth, but his eyes, narrow and guarded, betrayed a man accustomed to keeping his own counsel. He rose as Poirot entered, offering a handshake that was firm but perfunctory. Monsieur Blake, I am Hercule Poirot, the detective began, settling into a plush armchair with a grace that belied his compact frame. I am grateful for your time. Mademoiselle Lamarchant has engaged me to investigate the death of Amias Crale. A matter, I understand, close to your heart. Philip's lips tightened, and he sank back into his chair, a glass of whiskey cradled in his hand. Carla stirring up ghosts, Is she? I told her it's a fool's errand. Caroline killed Amias. The evidence was clear as day. But if she insists on digging, I'll tell you what I told the police 16 years ago. His voice carried the clipped authority of a man used to being heard. Yet there was a brittleness to it, as if the memory chafed. Poirot's mustache twitched, a subtle sign of his alertness. The past, Monsieur Blake, is a canvas that time often repaints. I would hear your version of that summer at Alderbury, painted afresh, if you please. Begin where you will, but omit nothing. Philip took a sip of his whiskey, his gaze drifting to the fire as if seeking the shapes of 1926 in its flames. Amias and I were thick as thieves since our school days, he began. He was a genius, you know, brilliant with a brush, but a devil with discipline, always chasing some passion, whether it was art or women. That summer, he invited me to Alderbury, their estate in Devon. Caroline was there, of course, playing the dutiful wife, though you could see the strain in her eyes. Then there was Elsa Greer, the girl he was painting, a stunner, barely 20, with a face that could stop a man's heart. Amias was smitten, and he didn't care who knew it. Poirot tilted his head, his fingers steepled. And Madame Crale, how did she bear this infatuation? Philip snorted, a sound heavy with disdain. Caroline, she was a volcano under ice. Never said much, but you could feel the heat. She'd watch Amias and Elsa, her lips tight, her hands fidgeting. I'd seen her like that before when Amias strayed, which he did often. But this time, with Elsa, it was different. He wasn't just flirting. He was obsessed. He'd set up his easel in the garden, painting her day after day, while Caroline hovered like a ghost. Poirot's eyes narrowed, noting the venom in Philip's tone when he spoke of Caroline. You did not care for Madame Crale, perhaps? Philip shrugged, his expression hardening. She was cold, always had been. Amias deserved better. Someone who could match his fire, not dampen it. She never understood him, not like I did. We talked for hours, you know, about art, life, everything. He trusted me. His voice softened briefly, a flicker of nostalgia, before it sharpened again. But Caroline, she was always watching, judging. I wasn't surprised when they found her fingerprints on that bottle. Poirot leaned forward, his voice smooth as velvet. The bottle, Monsieur Blake. Tell me if that day Amias Crale died. Philip's fingers tightened around his glass, the firelight glinting off the amber liquid. It was a warm August day, the kind that makes you lazy. Amias was in the garden, working on Elsa's portrait. He'd set up near the old stone wall, where the light was perfect. Elsa was posing, draped in some gauzy dress, looking like a goddess. Caroline came out around noon, carrying a bottle of beer for Amias. He was particular about his beer, liked it cold, straight from the cellar. She handed it to him, and he drank while he painted, barely looking at her. An hour later, he was dead. Poirot's mustache quivered slightly, a sign of his mind at work. And you, Monsieur Blake, where were you during this hour? I was in the house, reading in the library, Philip said quickly, his eyes flicking to Poirot's. Meredith, my brother, was pottering about in his laboratory nearby. Angela and her governess, Miss Williams, were off somewhere, probably bickering, as they often did. Elsa was with Amias, of course, and Caroline. Well, she came back to the house after giving him the beer. I saw her in the hall, looking pale. But I thought nothing of it then. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. The poison coniine, it was found in the beer, yes. And this came from your brother's laboratory. Philip's jaw tightened. Meredith was careless, always had been. He kept all sorts of chemicals in that shed of his, brewing up herbal nonsense. Coniine was there, and Caroline knew it. She'd been in his lab before, asking questions. The police found her fingerprints on the bottle, and that was that. Open and shut case. Poirot's fingers tapped lightly on the armrest, a rhythm to his thoughts. An open and shut case, you say? Yet Mademoiselle la Marchante believes otherwise. Let us return to the garden. Did you see anyone else near Monsieur Crale, or the bottle before his death? Philip hesitated, his brow furrowing. Elsa was there, fussing with her pose. Amia stepped away once, to mix paints, I think. She might have been near the table where the bottle was, but I didn't pay much attention. My eyes were on Amia's, not her. His voice grew clipped, as if the memory irritated him. Look, Poirot, I know what you're doing, trying to find cracks in the story, but Caroline did it. She was jealous, humiliated. She'd had enough. Poirot's smile was enigmatic, a flicker of amusement in his eyes. The heart, Monsieur Blake, is a complex thing, but the mind sees what the heart obscures. Tell me, what was the mood at Alderbury that summer? Were there tensions beyond the affair? Philip leaned back, swirling his whiskey. Tensions? The place was a powder keg. Amias was reckless, flaunting Elsa in front of Caroline. She'd put on a brave face, but you could see it eating her. Angela was a brat, always stirring trouble, arguing with Amias, or sulking with Caroline. Miss Williams tried to keep her in line, but it was like herding cats. Meredith, well, he kept to himself, mooning over his potions. And me, I just wanted to enjoy my holiday, but you couldn't escape the undercurrents. Poirot's gaze sharpened, catching the shift in Philip's tone. Undercurrents, you say? Of what nature? Philip's eyes flicked to the fire, avoiding Poirot's scrutiny. Just feelings. Amias was pulling away from all of us, lost in his painting and Elsa. I felt it too. He'd talk to me less, like I was in the way. Caroline noticed it. I'm sure. She'd watch him with Elsa, and you could see the hurt in her eyes. But she never broke, not outwardly. That's what made her dangerous, I suppose, keeping it all inside until it exploded. Poirot tilted his head, his voice soft, but probing. And you, Monsieur Blake, did you feel betrayed by your friend's preoccupation with Mademoiselle Greer? Philip's face darkened, a flush creeping up his neck. Betrayed? No. I was his friend, not his keeper. I didn't like Elsa too. Smug, too sure of herself, but Amias could do what he liked. I just wish he'd seen through her sooner. He drained his glass, setting it down with a clink. You're barking up the wrong tree, Poirot. Caroline's the one you should be looking at. Poirot rose, smoothing his coat with deliberate care. The tree, Monsieur Blake, has many branches, and I shall examine each one. I thank you for your candor. We shall speak again, perhaps, when the canvas of memory is clearer. Philip stood, his expression a mix of irritation and unease. You're wasting your time, but suit yourself. Carla's paying you, I suppose. Poirot's smile was polite, but his eyes gleamed with unspoken thoughts. Hercule Poirot does not waste time, monsieur. The truth, it waits patiently, and I am its servant. With a slight bow, he turned and left the room, the porter guiding him back through the smoky corridors. Outside, the fog had thickened, wrapping the city in a gray shroud. Poirot hailed a taxi, his mind alive with impressions. Philip Blake's account was vivid, painted with the bold strokes of a man certain of his truth. Yet there were shadows in his story, his loyalty to Amias, tinged with resentment, his disdain for Caroline, too sharp to be impartial, and his fleeting mention of Elsa near the bottle, a detail he seemed reluctant to dwell on. The canvas of memory, Poirot mused, was not a single painting but a series of sketches, each colored by the artist's heart. He leaned back in the taxi, his little gray cells humming. Philip's narrative was the first of 5, a foundation on which to build. The next pig, Meredith Blake, awaited in the country, a chemist whose laboratory had birthed the poison. Poirot's fingers tapped a rhythm on his knee, a silent promise to unravel the threads of 1926. The truth, he knew, lay not in the bold lines of Philip's story, but in the subtle shades between them, shades of envy, loyalty, and hidden desires that only Hercule Poirot could bring to light. Chapter 3. The Pig Who Stayed Home. The train to Devon wound through a patchwork of green fields and mist-shrouded hills, its rhythm a soothing counterpoint to Hercule Poirot's restless thoughts. The detective sat in a first-class compartment, his gloved hands resting on a polished walking stick, his eyes fixed on the passing landscape. The case of Caroline Crale, like a half-finished puzzle, tantalized him. Philip Blake's account, delivered with such certainty in the smoky confines of his London club, had been a vivid sketch, but its bold lines left gaps that only the other witnesses could fill. Today, Poirot sought Meredith Blake, the second pig of the nursery rhyme, a man described as a reclusive chemist who had stayed close to home, both literally and figuratively, during that fateful summer at Alderbury. The station at Handcross was a modest affair, its platform damp from a recent drizzle. Poirot, immaculate in his overcoat and Homburg hat, stepped onto the gravel path leading to Meredith Blake's residence, a rambling manor house nestled in a wooded valley. The air carried the scent of wet earth and pine, and the silence was profound, broken only by the distant call of a rook. Poirot's mustache twitched as he approached the house, noting its air of gentle neglectivity creeping unchecked over the stone facade, windows clouded with age. This was a place, he thought, where time moved slowly, preserving memories like specimens in a jar. A housekeeper, gray-haired and brisk, admitted him to a cluttered drawing room where Meredith Blake awaited. He was a slight man, nearing 60, with a scholar's stoop and eyes that darted nervously behind wire-rimmed spectacles. His tweed suit was worn but well kept, and his hands, stained faintly with chemical residue, fidgeted with a pipe he did not light. He rose as Poirot entered, offering a hesitant smile. "Monsieur Blake." "I am Hercule Poirot," the detective began, settling into a chair that creaked under his weight. "I am grateful for your hospitality. You know, I presume, the purpose of my visit." Meredith nodded, his fingers tightening on the pipe. "Yes, Carla wrote to me. She's determined to revisit the past. Poor girl. I'm not sure what I can tell you that hasn't been said, but I'll do my best." His voice was soft, tinged with a melancholy that suggested he carried the weight of those events still. Poirot's eyes, sharp as a hawk's, studied the man. "The best, Monsieur Blake, is precisely what I seek. The truth, it hides in the details. And you, I understand, were a witness to the summer of 1926 at Alderbury. Tell me your story, from the beginning, if you please." Meredith leaned back, his gaze drifting to a window where raindrops traced slow paths. "I was never one for society, not like my brother Philip," he began. "Alderbury was Amia's and Caroline's place, but I lived nearby, in my own house. I'd visit often, drawn by Amias's vitality and Caroline's quiet strength. That summer, though the air was heavy with tension, Amias was painting Elsa Greer, a young woman of remarkable beauty. It was clear he was infatuated, and Caroline, well, she bore it with a dignity that broke my heart." Poirot tilted his head, his fingers steepled. "Madame Crale, you admired her." Meredith's eyes softened. "Very much. She was not flashy, not like Amia's or Elsa. She had a depth, a resilience. I saw how she suffered, watching Amia's with Elsa, but she never lashed out. She'd smile, tend to the house, look after Angela. I thought her remarkable." His voice faltered, and he busied himself with his unlit pipe. Poirot noted the warmth in Meredith's tone, a contrast to Philip's disdain. "And yet, Monsieur, she was convicted of her husband's murder. The poison coniine came from your laboratory, did it not?" Meredith's face paled, his hands trembling slightly. Yes, and I've never forgiven myself for it. I kept a small quantity of coniine, extracted from hemlock from my studies. It was locked in my laboratory, or so I thought. Caroline knew of it. She'd visited my lab once, curious about my work. She asked about poisons, their effects. I thought it was mere intellectual curiosity. I never imagined. He trailed off, his eyes distant. Poirot's mustache quivered, a sign of his mind at work. Describe this laboratory, monsieur, and its place in the events of that summer. Meredith gestured vaguely toward the window. It's a short walk. From Alderbury, across the garden, and through a copse. A stone shed, really, filled with my equipment vials, burners, notebooks. I'd spend hours there, experimenting with herbal remedies. That summer, I was often at Alderbury, so the lab was left unattended at times. Anyone could have entered, I suppose, though I kept it locked. His voice grew strained. The day Amias died, I was there in the morning, checking my notes. Caroline came by, just to chat, she said. I didn't think anything of it then. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And this was when, precisely? Meredith frowned, rubbing his forehead. Early, perhaps 9 o'clock. She seemed distracted, but I was preoccupied. I left for Alderbury soon after, to join the others for breakfast. Later, when Amias collapsed, I remembered her visit, and, well, the police found her fingerprints on the bottle. I couldn't believe she'd do it, but the evidence. He shook his head, as if trying to dislodge the memory. Poirot leaned forward, his voice soft but insistent. Let us go to the day of the murder, monsieur. Paint for me the scene, as you recall it. Meredith set down his pipe, his hands clasping together as if to steady himself. It was a warm day, the garden full of color. Amias was painting Elsa by the stone wall, his easel set up near a small table. He was in high spirits, joking with Elsa, though I could see Caroline watching from the terrace, her face like a mask. Around noon, she brought him a bottle of beer from the cellar. He thanked her, barely looking up from his canvas. I was on the terrace with Philip, reading. Angela and Miss Williams were off somewhere. Angela was always running about, and Miss Williams was trying to keep her in check. Poirot's fingers tapped lightly on his walking stick. And Mademoiselle Greer, what was her demeanor? Meredith hesitated, his brow furrowing. Elsa was radiant. She knew the power she held over Amias. She'd pose, laugh, tease him. But there was a hardness to her, a calculation. I remember her adjusting her scarf on the table where the beer stood, just before Amias drank. I thought nothing of it at the time, but now. His voice trailed off, his eyes meeting Poirot's with a flicker of unease. Poirot's gaze sharpened, catching the detail. She was near the bottle, you say? Alone. For a moment, yes, Meredith admitted. Amias had stepped away too. Fetch a brush or some paint. Elsa was fidgeting, as she often did when he wasn't directing her. I was too far to see clearly, but she was by the table, alone, for a minute or two. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. And after this, what happened? Meredith's hands twisted together. Amias returned, took a swig of the beer, and kept painting. Within an hour, he was staggering, clutching his chest. He collapsed, and we all rushed to him. Caroline was there, kneeling beside him, her face white as death. I ran to my laboratory to fetch anything that might help, but it was too late. The doctor later confirmed it was coniine. The police found the bottle with Caroline's fingerprints, and that was that. His voice broke, and he looked away, his guilt palpable. Poirot leaned back, his eyes half closed, as if visualizing the scene. You blame yourself, monsieur, for the poison's accessibility. Meredith nodded, his shoulders sagging. If I'd been more careful, locked the lab properly, perhaps none of this would have happened. Caroline might still be alive, Carla, might have had a mother. I've gone over it 1,000 times, wondering if I missed something. Poirot's voice was gentle, almost soothing. The mind, it tortures itself with what might have been. But tell me, monsieur, what was the dynamic between the others that summer? Beyond Amias and Elsa, were there other tensions? Meredith sighed, his fingers resuming their restless dance with the pipe. The house was a cauldron of emotions. Philip was devoted to Amias, almost possessive, and he disapproved of Elsa, though he'd never admit it. Angela was at that difficult age, full of fire and resentment toward Amias for his neglect. Miss Williams kept a tight rein on her, but you could see her watching everyone, judging. And Caroline, she was the center of it all, holding everything together while it tore her apart. I admired her, but I feared for her too. Poirot's mustache quivered slightly, a sign of his mind piecing together the fragments. And Mademoiselle Greer, did she interact with the others? Elsa kept to Amias mostly, Meredith said. She'd charmed Philip when it suited her, but she ignored Angela and Miss Williams. With Caroline, there was a coldness, like two queens in a chess game. Elsa knew she had Amias's heart, and she flaunted it. I sometimes wondered if she enjoyed Caroline's pain. Poirot rose, smoothing his coat with deliberate care. You have painted a vivid picture, Monsieur Blake. The garden, the bottle, the players in this tragedy, they begin to take shape. I shall reflect on your words, and we may speak again. Meredith stood, his expression a mix of relief and apprehension. I hope you find what Carla seeks, Monsieur Poirot. But be careful. The truth can be a bitter thing. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. The truth, monsieur, is like a rare flower. It blooms only for those who seek it with care. I am Hercule Poirot, and I am most careful. With a slight bow, he turned and left the room, the housekeeper escorting him to the door. Outside, the drizzle had ceased, leaving the air fresh and sharp. Poirot walked slowly toward the station, his mind alive with Meredith's account. Unlike Philip's bold certainty, Meredith's story was softer, tinged with guilt and admiration for Caroline. His mention of Elsa near the bottle echoed Philip's, a detail that pricked Poirot's curiosity. The laboratory, too, was a new piece of the puzzle, place of opportunity for anyone with intent. Meredith's guilt, Poirot mused, was genuine, but was it for negligence alone, or something deeper? As the train carried him back to London, Poirot's little grey cells hummed with activity. 2 pigs had spoken, their memories forming a curate of loyalty, envy, and regret. 3 remained, Delsa, Angela, and Miss Williams each, holding a piece of the truth. The nursery rhyme, Poirot thought, was proving a fitting guide, each pig revealing a new shade of the past. He leaned back, his eyes half closed, already anticipating the next encounter, where the canvas of memory would grow ever more complex. Chapter 4. The pig with roast beef. The London air was crisp, carrying the faint tang of coal smoke as Hercule Poirot's taxi glided through Mayfair's elegant streets. His destination was the grand residence of Lady Didisham, formerly Elsa Greer, the 3rd pig in the nursery rhyme that framed his investigation into the 16-year-old murder of Amias Crale. Poirot's mind, ever orderly, sifted through the accounts of Philip and Meredith Blake, each a contrasting brushstroke. On the canvas of that fatal summer at Alderbury, Philip's certainty had been rigid, Meredith's tinged with guilt, but both had placed Elsa near the poisoned beer bottle, a detail that sharpened Poirot's curiosity. Now, he would hear from the woman who had been Amias's muse and mistress, a figure whose beauty and ambition had cast a long shadow over the tragedy. The Didisham residence was a monument to wealth, its Georgian facade gleaming with fresh paint, its windows reflecting the weak November sun. A butler, impeccable in black, admitted Poirot to a drawing-room that exuded opulence, crystal chandeliers, silk draperies, and a marble fireplace where flames danced with quiet elegance. Elsa Greer, now Lady Didisham, stood by a tall window, her silhouette framed against the light. She was in her late 30s, her beauty undimmed by time-high cheekbones, luminous eyes, and hair that fell in golden waves. Yet there was a hardness to her, a polished edge that spoke of a life carefully curated. She turned as Poirot entered, her smile cool and appraising. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice low and measured, "Carla warned me you'd come. I confess I'm curious. Why dredge up such an old, sad story?" She gestured to a velvet-upholstered chair. Seating herself opposite with the grace of a practiced hostess, Poirot settled into the chair, his small frame somehow commanding the space. "Mademoiselle, pardon, Lady Didisham, the truth, it does not age. Mademoiselle Lamarchine seeks to clear her mother's name, and I, Hercule Poirot, am tasked with finding the truth of Amias Crale's death. You, I understand, were central to that summer. I would hear your account, if you please." Elsa's smile tightened, a flicker of disdain crossing her features. "Central, I suppose I was. Amias was painting my portrait, and we were close. Caroline couldn't stand it, of course. She killed him for it. The police proved that. What more is there to say?" Her tone was light, almost dismissive, but her eyes were wary, watching Poirot as a cat watches a sparrow. Poirot's mustache twitched, a subtle sign of his alertness. "The police, they draw their conclusions, but I, Poirot, prefer to see with my own eyes. Tell me of that summer at Alderbury, Lady Didisham. Paint for me the scene, as you saw it." Elsa leaned back, crossing her legs with deliberate ease. "Very well. It was 1926, a glorious summer. Amias invited me to Alderbury to sit for a portrait. He was a genius. You know, his work was alive, passionate. I was 20, thrilled to be his subject. He set up his easel in the garden, near a stone wall draped with roses. We'd work for hours, him painting, me posing, the sun warm on our skin. He was in love with me, and I with him. It was intoxicating." Her lips curved, a hint of nostalgia softening her expression. Poirot's eyes narrowed, catching the shift in her tone. "And Madame Crale, how did she fit into this idyll?" Elsa's smile faded, replaced by a cold edge. "Caroline was a shadow over everything. She'd drift about, pretending to be the perfect wife, bringing tea, tending to Angela, smiling at the guests. But you could see the jealousy in her eyes, the way she watched Amias and me. She hated me, and I didn't care. Amias was mine, or so I thought." Her voice hardened, a trace of bitterness surfacing. Poirot tilted his head, his voice soft but probing. "You thought? Did Monsieur Crale, perhaps, waver in his affections?" Elsa's fingers tightened on the armrest, a fleeting sign of tension. "Amias was complicated. He loved me, but he was tied to Caroline, habit, duty, whatever you call it. He'd talk of leaving her, but he never did. It infuriated me, but I was patient. I believed in his art, in us." She paused, her gaze flicking to the fire, "until she took him from me." Poirot's fingers tapped lightly on his knee, a rhythm to his thoughts. "The day of the murder, Lady Didisham, describe it, if you please." Elsa's eyes met his, steady and unyielding. "It was like any other day at first. Amias was painting me in the garden. The canvas was nearly finished, and he was excited, saying it was his best work. Around noon, Caroline brought him a bottle of beer from the cellar. She handed it to him, and he drank, barely acknowledging her. I was posing, focused on holding my position. Then, maybe an hour later, he started to sway, his brush slipping. He collapsed, gasping, and we all ran to him. Caroline was there, screaming his name. It was chaos." Her voice was calm, almost detached, as if recounting a scene from a play. Poirot leaned forward, his gaze piercing. "And you, Lady Didisham, where were you in that hour before his collapse?" Elsa's expression remained composed, but her eyes flickered. I was posing, as I said. Emia stepped away once, to mix paints or fetch something from his box. I stayed by the easel, adjusting my scarf. The beer was on the table nearby, but I didn't touch it. Why would I? Her tone was defiant, a challenge beneath the words. Poirot's mustache quivered slightly. The table, you say? Were you alone with the bottle during this moment? For a fraction of a second, Elsa's composure wavered, her lips parting before she caught herself. Alone, I suppose so, for a moment. But it was nothing, just me waiting for Emia's to return. The others were scattered about Philip on the terrace, Meredith somewhere, Angela and Miss Williams off arguing, as usual. Caroline had gone back to the house after bringing the beer. She shrugged, her nonchalance almost too perfect. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. And the poison, Conian, you were aware of its presence in Monsieur Meredith Blake's laboratory? Elsa's brow arched, a hint of amusement in her eyes. Meredith's little shed. Everyone knew he played with his chemicals. Caroline had been there, poking around, asking questions. I never went near the place myself, too dusty and dull. But she knew about the Conian. The police said so. Her voice carried a faint accusation, as if pointing a finger at Caroline. Absolved her of scrutiny. Poirot's fingers steepled, his voice soft as velvet. You paint a vivid picture, Lady Didisham, but let us explore the dynamics of that summer. You were, as you say, close to Monsieur Crale. How did the others regard you? Elsa's smile was sharp, almost predatory. They resented me, of course. Philip was jealous of anyone who came near Emia's. He wanted to be his only confidant. Meredith was too meek to say much, but he mooned over Caroline, so he didn't care for me. Angela was a spoiled child, always glaring at me. Miss Williams, that governess, looked at me like I was something she'd scrape off her shoe. And Caroline, she loathed me, but she was too proud to show it openly. She'd smile, but her eyes were daggers. Elsa's laugh was low, almost a purr. I didn't care. I had Emia's. Poirot's eyes gleamed, catching the undercurrent of triumph in her words. And yet you say he did not leave Madame Crale. Did this not frustrate you? Elsa's gaze hardened, a flash of something anger, perhaps crossing her face. Frustrate. I was young, Monsieur Poirot. I believed in love, in destiny. Emia's would have come to me, given time. Caroline took that time from us. Her voice was steady, but her hands betrayed her, fingers twisting the edge of her sleeve. Poirot rose, smoothing his coat with deliberate care. You have been most forthcoming, Lady Didisham. Your account adds a new hue to the canvas of that summer. I shall reflect on it, and perhaps we shall speak again. Elsa stood, her height and elegance imposing. I've told you everything, Monsieur Poirot. There's nothing more to find. Caroline poisoned that beer. The fingerprints proved it. You're chasing shadows. Her tone was final, but her eyes followed him, wary and calculating. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Shadows, Lady Didisham, often conceal the truth. And I, Hercule Poirot, am adept at bringing them to light. With a slight bow, he turned and left the room, the butler escorting him to the door. Outside, the Mayfair street was quiet, the sun dipping low, casting long shadows. Poirot hailed a taxi, his mind alive with impressions. Elsa's account was polished, almost rehearsed, her beauty a shield for a mind that calculated every word. Her proximity to the beer bottle, confirmed now by 3 witnesses, was a thread he could not ignore. Yet her disdain for Caroline was too sharp, her confidence too absolute. Was it the certainty of innocence, or the arrogance of one who believed her crime undetectable? As the taxi carried him through the darkening city, Poirot's little gray cells buzzed with activity. Elsa Greer, the radiant muse, had painted herself as a victim of Caroline's jealousy. But her story held cracks, moments of hesitation, a fleeting tension in her hands. The nursery rhyme, he thought, was proving apt. This little piggy had roast beef, and Elsa had feasted on Amyas's adoration. But had she also hungered for his freedom, enough to poison his drink and cast the blame elsewhere? 2 witnesses remained, Angela Warren and Miss Williams, each with their own perspective on the tragedy. Poirot leaned back, his eyes half closed, the puzzle taking shape. The truth, he knew, was a mosaic, and Elsa's piece, though dazzling, was but one part of the whole. He would continue, relentless, until every fragment was in place. Chapter 5. The Pig with None. The train from London to Oxford carried Hercule Poirot through a landscape of rolling hills, their green softened by a November mist that clung to the earth like a whispered secret. The detective sat by the window, his gloved hands folded over the head of his walking stick, his sharp eyes fixed on the passing scenery, but seeing instead the intricate puzzle of Amias Crale's murder. 3 witnesses had spoken. Philip Blake, with his rigid loyalty and disdain for Caroline. Meredith Blake, haunted by guilt over his unsecured poison. And Elsa Greer, now Lady Didisham, whose polished beauty masked a calculating heart. Each had placed Elsa near the fatal beer bottle, a detail that gnawed at Poirot's mind like a persistent melody. Now he sought the 4th pig of the nursery rhyme, Angela Warren, Caroline's younger half-sister, whose youthful perspective might illuminate a new corner of that tragic summer at Alderbury. The taxi from Oxford station wound through narrow streets to a modest townhouse, its brick facade unassuming yet tidy, with ivy framing the windows. Angela Warren, now a renowned archaeologist in her early 30s, had agreed to meet Poirot here, her temporary base between expeditions. The door was opened by a housekeeper, who led him to a study cluttered with books, maps, and artifacts of pottery, a bronze figurine, a notebook filled with meticulous sketches. Angela stood by a desk, her dark hair pulled back, her face tanned and lined from years under foreign suns. She was tall, with a direct gaze and a handshake that was firm, almost defiant. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice clear and resonant, "Carla told me you're digging into the past. I'll help however I can, for her sake and my sister's. But I warn you, it's not a pleasant memory." She gestured to a chair, seating herself opposite, her posture alert but unguarded. Poirot settled into the chair, his small frame exuding a quiet authority. "Mademoiselle Warren, I am grateful for your candor. The past, it is a wound that festers until the truth heals it. You were young during that summer at Alderbury, 16, I believe. Yet youth sees much that age overlooks. Tell me your story. From the beginning, if you please." Angela's eyes darkened, her fingers tracing the edge of a clay fragment on the desk. "I was a difficult girl back then, full of anger and ideals. Caroline raised me after our parents died. She was more mother than sister. I adored her, but I hated Amias. He was charming, larger than life, but he treated Caroline like an afterthought. That summer, with Elsa Greer there, it was worse. He was besotted, painting her every day, barely noticing Caroline's pain. I'd watch from the sidelines, furious, wanting to shake him." Her voice carried a raw edge, the embers of that teenage resentment still glowing. Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of his keen interest. "You felt protective of Madame Crale. Did you see her as capable of the crime for which she was convicted?" Angela's gaze snapped to his, fierce and unwavering. "Never. Caroline was no murderer. She loved Amias, despite everything. She'd endure his affairs, his neglect, because she believed in their life together. The idea that she poisoned him is absurd. The police latched onto her fingerprints and never looked further." Her hands clenched, her knuckles whitening against the desk. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "The police, they see what is presented. I, Hercule Poirot, see what is hidden. Let us go to that summer, mademoiselle. Describe the household, the tensions you observed. Angela leaned back, her eyes distant as she summoned the memory. Alderbury was beautiful gardens, terraces, the sea nearby, but it felt like a stage for a tragedy. Aeneas was the star, always commanding attention. Elsa was his leading lady, all smiles and allure, knowing exactly how to keep him hooked. Philip Blake hung around like a loyal dog, resenting anyone who got too close to Aeneas. Meredith, his brother, was quieter, always slipping off to his laboratory, but he'd watch Caroline with this sad, hopeless look. Miss Williams, my governess, was a stern old bird, always lecturing me on duty and decorum. And Caroline, she was the heart of it all, holding everything together while it broke her. Angela's voice softened, a rare vulnerability surfacing. Poirot's fingers tapped lightly on his stick, a rhythm to his thoughts. And you, mademoiselle, how did you fit into this tableau? I was the troublemaker, Angela admitted, a wry smile flickering. I'd argue with Aeneas, snap at Elsa, even clash with Miss Williams. I felt Caroline's pain, and I wanted to protect her, but I was just a kid, powerless. I'd roam the gardens, sulk in my room, or pester Meredith about his experiments. Anything to avoid watching Aeneas and Elsa together. Her smile faded, replaced by a frown. It was suffocating, that house. Everyone pretending things were normal while the air crackled with resentment. Poirot leaned forward, his voice soft but probing. The day of the murder, Mademoiselle Warren. Paint for me the scene, as you saw it. Angela's hands stilled, her gaze fixed on the clay fragment as if it held the past. It was a hot August day, the garden humming with bees. Aeneas was painting Elsa by the stone wall, his easel set up near a little table. I was restless, wandering between the house and the garden. Around noon, I saw Caroline bring Aeneas a bottle of beer from the cellar. She handed it to him, and he grunted something, barely looking at her. She left, her face tight, and I went to find Miss Williams for a lesson. Later, I was in the garden again, near the wall. I saw Elsa by the table, adjusting her pose, or her scarf something. Aeneas was a few steps away, rummaging in his paint box. She was alone with the beer for a moment. Angela paused, her brow furrowing. I didn't think much of it then, but now. Poirot's eyes gleamed, catching the detail that echoed the other's accounts. Alone with the bottle, you say? For how long? A minute, maybe less, Angela said, her voice uncertain. Aeneas came back quickly, took a drink, and kept painting. I wandered off again. Miss Williams was calling me. Then, maybe an hour later, I heard shouts. I ran back and saw Aeneas on the ground, Caroline kneeling beside him, her hands on his face. Elsa was screaming. Philip was there, Meredith running from the house. It was chaos. He was dead before the doctor arrived. Her voice cracked, and she looked away, her fingers tightening on the clay. Poirot's mustache quivered slightly, a sign of his mind at work. The poison coniine from Monsieur Meredith Blake's laboratory. Were you aware of it? Angela nodded, her expression grim. Meredith showed it to me once, a little vial in his shed. He was proud of his experiments, always talking about plants and their properties. Caroline knew about it, too. She'd visited his lab with me a few times, but she'd never touch it. She wasn't like that. Her tone was fierce, a defense of her sister's character. Poirot's gaze sharpened. And Mademoiselle Greer, did you see her in the laboratory at any time? Angela frowned, thinking, no, never. Elsa wasn't interested in Meredith's work. She barely spoke to him. She was always with Aeneas, or posing for him, but she knew about the lab, I'm sure. Everyone did. It wasn't a secret. Her voice carried a hint of suspicion, as if the memory of Elsa's proximity to the bottle had stirred something new. Poirot leaned back, his eyes half closed as if visualizing the scene. The dynamics. Mademoiselle Warren, beyond Amias and Elsa? What undercurrents did you sense in the household? Angela's lips pressed into a thin line. It was a tangle of loyalties and grudges. Philip worshipped Amias, but he hated Elsa for stealing his attention. Meredith was kind, but he was in love with Caroline, in his quiet way. He'd never say it, but I saw how he looked at her. Miss Williams was the outsider, always watching, judging us all. Elsa was cruel, in a way. She'd flaunt her hold over Amias, knowing it hurt Caroline. And I was just a kid, caught in the middle, hating how everyone ignored Caroline's suffering. Her voice trembled, then steadied. I failed her, Monsieur Poirot. I couldn't protect her. Poirot's voice was gentle, almost soothing. You are young, mademoiselle. The heart of youth is fierce, but it cannot carry all burdens. You have given me much to consider. One final question. Did you hear any arguments, perhaps, between Madame Crale and her husband? Angela hesitated, her eyes searching Poirot's. The night before he died, I heard them in the library. Caroline was angrily angry. She said something like, "You'll be sorry if you keep this up." Amias laughed it off, but it scared me. She wasn't violent, though. It was just pain talking. Her voice softened, a plea for understanding. Poirot rose, smoothing his coat with deliberate care. You have painted a vivid picture, Mademoiselle Warren. Your loyalty to your sister, it is a beacon in this dark tale. I shall reflect on your words, and we may speak again. Angela stood, her expression a mix of hope and pain. Find the truth, Monsieur Poirot. For Carla, for Caroline. They deserve it. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. The truth, mademoiselle, is my quarry, and I, Hercule Poirot, am a relentless hunter. With a slight bow, he turned and left the study, the housekeeper escorting him to the door. Outside, the Oxford air was chill, the mist thicker now, curling around the street lamps. Poirot hailed a taxi, his mind alive with Angela's account. Her fierce defense of Caroline was a new color on the canvas. But her mention of Elsa near the bottle now, a recurring motif, deepened his suspicion. The argument she overheard added a layer of complexity, a moment of Caroline's anger that the police had seized upon. Yet Angela's conviction in her sister's innocence was unshakable. A contrast to Philip's certainty and Elsa's cold accusations. As the taxi carried him back to the station, Poirot's little grey cells hummed with activity. 4 pigs had spoken, their stories weaving a tapestry of love, jealousy, and hidden motives. One remained Miss Williams, the governess, whose detached perspective might hold the final key. The nursery rhyme, Poirot thought, was guiding him closer to the truth, each pig revealing a fragment of the past. He leaned back, his eyes half closed, the puzzle sharpening in his mind like a blade. Chapter 6. The Pig Who Cried Wee Wee Weather. Late November wind swept across the Sussex countryside, carrying with it the sharp bite of approaching winter. Hercule Poirot, bundled in his heavy overcoat, stepped from the train onto the platform of a small village station, his polished shoes gleaming against the damp stone. His destination was a modest cottage, home to Miss Cecilia Williams, the 5th and final pig in the nursery rhyme that had guided his investigation into the murder of Amias Crale 16 years prior. The accounts of Philip Blake's rigid loyalty, Meredith Blake's guilty reticence, Elsa Greer's calculated charm, and Angela Warren's fierce devotion had painted a vivid yet fragmented picture of that fateful summer at Alderbury. Each witness had placed Elsa near the poisoned beer bottle, a recurring thread that tugged at Poirot's meticulous mind. Now, he sought the perspective of the governess, whose reputation for precision and detachment promised a new lens on the tragedy. The cottage was a quaint affair, its garden neatly trimmed, its whitewashed walls glowing softly in the pale sunlight. Poirot knocked, and the door was opened by Miss Williams herself. A woman in her late 60s with a ramrod-straight posture and eyes that missed nothing. Her gray hair was pulled into a severe bun, and her plain wool dress spoke of practicality over vanity. She regarded Poirot with a mixture of curiosity and reserve, her thin lips forming a polite but guarded smile. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice crisp as autumn leaves. "Miss Le Marchant wrote to me of your inquiry. I am prepared to assist, though I wonder what new light can be shed on so old a matter. Please, come in." She gestured to a small parlor, its furnishing spare but immaculate. A single vase of dried lavender, the only concession to ornament. Poirot settled into a chair, his small frame radiating a quiet authority. "Mademoiselle Williams, I am grateful for your time. The past, it is a book that remains open until the truth is read clearly. You were governess to Mademoiselle Angela Warren during the summer of 1926 at Alderbury. I would hear your account of those events, as you saw them." Miss Williams sat opposite, her hands folded precisely in her lap. "I shall be as accurate as memory allows, Monsieur Poirot. I was employed to educate Angela, a bright but willful girl. The household at Alderbury was complex, shall we say. Amias Crale was a man of great talent, but little restraint. Caroline, his wife, bore his indiscretions with remarkable fortitude. The presence of Elsa Greer, his model and mistress, created a tension that permeated the entire estate. Her tone was measured, almost clinical, as if she were delivering a report. Poor mustache twitched, a sign of his keen interest. "You observed Madame Crale closely, I presume. What was your impression of her character?" Miss Williams's eyes narrowed slightly, assessing Poirot. Caroline was a woman of depth and dignity. She was not given to displays of emotion, which some mistook for coldness. I saw it as strength. She loved her husband, despite his behavior, and she devoted herself to Angela's care. I found her admirable, though I confess I pitied her, watching Amias flaunt his affair with Miss Greer. Her voice held a trace of disapproval, directed not at Caroline but at the situation. Poirot nodded, his fingers steepled. "And Mademoiselle Greer, how did she conduct herself?" Miss Williams's lips pursed, a flicker of disdain crossing her face. Elsa Greer was young, beautiful, and utterly self-assured. She knew the power she held over Amias, and reveled in it. She was not cruel in an overt way, but there was a callousness to her, a disregard for Caroline's feelings. She moved through Alderbury as if it were her stage, and Amias her captive audience. Her tone was sharp, a rare crack in her composure. Eyes gleamed, catching the undercurrent of judgment. "Let us turn to the day of the murder, mademoiselle. Describe for me the scene, as you recall it." Miss Williams's hands remained still, her gaze steady as she summoned the memory. It was a warm day, the garden vibrant with color. Amias was painting Miss Greer by the stone wall, his easel set up near a small table where he kept his supplies. I was with Angela for much of the morning, trying to keep her focused on her studies, though she was restless, as always. Around noon, I saw Caroline bring Amias a bottle of beer from the cellar. She placed it on the table and left, her expression strained but composed. Amias took a drink, barely acknowledging her. I was on the terrace, correcting Angela's Latin, but I could see the garden clearly. Her voice was precise, each word chosen with care. Poirot leaned forward, his voice soft but probing. "And Mademoiselle Greer, what was her position during this time?" Miss Williams's eyes narrowed, a spark of recollection. "She was posing, but Amias stepped away briefly. Something about his paints, I believe." Miss Greer remained by the easel, near the table with the beer. I saw her adjust her scarf, her hands lingering near the bottle for a moment. I thought little of it, then she was always fussing with her appearance. But it struck me later, when the poison was discovered. Her tone was measured, but the implication hung in the air. Poirot's mustache quivered, a sign of his mind latching onto the detail. Alone with the bottle, you say? For how long? A minute, perhaps 2. Miss Williams replied. Amyas returned quickly, and she resumed her pose. I was distracted by Angela, who is arguing about her lessons, so I cannot be certain of every movement. But Miss Greer was certainly near the table, alone, during that interval. Her voice carried a quiet certainty, as if she had revisited the moment many times. Poirot's fingers tapped lightly on his walking stick. And after this, what occurred? Miss Williams's expression grew somber. Within an hour, Amyas began to falter. I was still on the terrace when I heard Elsa cry out. I looked up and saw him staggering, clutching his chest. He fell, and Caroline was there almost instantly, kneeling beside him, her face white with panic. Philip Blake appeared from the house. Meredith came running from his laboratory, and Angela was there, too, frozen in shock. I tried to help, but it was clear he was beyond saving. The doctor confirmed it was poison coniine from Meredith's laboratory. Her voice remained steady, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of sorrow. Poirot leaned back, his eyes half closed as if visualizing the scene. The poison, mademoiselle. Were you aware of its presence in Monsieur Meredith Blake's laboratory? Miss Williams nodded, her expression grim. Meredith was an amateur chemist, always experimenting with plants and compounds. He showed me his laboratory once, proud of his collection, including the coniine. Caroline knew of it. She'd visited the shed with Angela, asking questions about his work. I thought it harmless curiosity at the time. But after the murder, the police focused on her knowledge of the poison and her fingerprints on the bottle. Her voice held a trace of frustration, as if she resented the simplicity of their conclusion. Poirot's gaze sharpened. And Mademoiselle Greer, did you ever see her in the laboratory? Miss Williams shook her head firmly. No, never. She had no interest in Meredith's experiments. Her world revolved around Amyas and his painting. But she was aware of the laboratory, everyone. Was no secret that Meredith kept dangerous substances there? Her tone was matter of fact, but her eyes lingered on Poirot. As if gauging his reaction, Poirot's voice was gentle, almost soothing. The household, Mademoiselle Williams. What were the dynamics you observed that summer, beyond the affair? Miss Williams's lips pressed into a thin line, her hands still folded tightly. Alderbury was a crucible of emotions, Monsieur Poirot. Amyas was the center, his charisma drawing everyone in, but his recklessness caused pain. Caroline was the anchor, maintaining order despite her own suffering. Philip Blake was possessive, almost jealous of Amelie's attention to others. Meredith was kinder, but his admiration for Caroline made him uneasy around Elsa. Angela was a storm of adolescent rebellion, resenting Amyas and clashing with me. And Elsa, she was a catalyst, stirring conflict simply by existing. She thrived on Amyas's devotion, indifferent to the havoc it caused. Her voice was precise, but a quiet indignation simmered beneath it. Poirot tilted his head, his voice soft but insistent. And you, mademoiselle, how did you navigate this turmoil? Miss Williams's eyes met his unflinching. I was an observer, Monsieur Poirot. My role was to educate Angela, not to meddle in the family's affairs. But I saw everything. Glances, the silences, the unspoken resentments. I pitied Caroline, admired her strength, but I kept my distance. It was not my place to intervene. Her tone was firm, but a shadow of regret crossed her face. Poirot rose, smoothing his coat with deliberate care. You have given me a clear window into that summer, Mademoiselle Williams. Your precision, it is a gift to this investigation. I shall reflect on your words, and perhaps we shall speak again. Miss Williams stood, her posture as erect as ever. I hope you find what Miss Lamarchine seeks, Monsieur Caroline deserved better than the judgment she received. Her voice was steady, but her eyes held a quiet plea. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "The truth, mademoiselle, is a light that reveals all, and I, Hercule Poirot, am its bearer." With a slight bow, he turned and left the cottage, the door closing softly behind him. Outside, the Sussex air was sharp, the sky heavy with impending rain. Poirot walked slowly to the station, his mind alive with Miss Williams's account. Her detached clarity was a stark contrast to Angela's passion, Elsa's calculation, Meredith's guilt, and Philip's bias. Yet her testimony reinforced the pattern. Elsa, alone with the beer bottle for a fleeting moment, a detail now echoed by all 5 witnesses. The governess's observation of Caroline's dignity and Elsa's callousness added depth to the human drama. But it was the bottle that held Poirot's focus, a pivot around which the truth might turn. As the train carried him back to London, Poirot's little grey cells hummed with activity. The 5 pigs had spoken, their stories forming a tapestry of conflicting motives and half-remembered moments. The nursery rhyme had guided him through their perspectives, each revealing a piece of the puzzle. Now, he would return to Alderbury, to walk the ground where Amyas died, to test the threads of memory against the reality of the scene. The truth, he knew, was close, hidden in the interplay of these voices, waiting for Hercule Poirot to bring it to light. Chapter 7. The Garden of Suspicion. The winter sun hung low over the Devon countryside, casting a pale watery light across the rolling hills as Hercule Poirot's hired car wound its way toward Alderbury, the once vibrant estate where Amyas Crale met his end 16 years ago. The detective sat in the back, his gloved hands resting on his walking stick, his sharp eyes fixed on the horizon, but seeing instead the intricate mosaic of testimonies he had gathered. Philip Blake's rigid certainty, Meredith Blake's guilt-ridden hesitance, Elsa Greer's calculated poise, Angela Warren's fierce loyalty, and Miss Williams's clinical precision had each added a distinct hue to the canvas of that fatal summer. Yet one detail echoed through all 5 accounts. Elsa, alone with the poisoned beer bottle, for a fleeting moment. This thread, delicate but persistent, tugged at Poirot's meticulous mind, urging him to see the scene for himself. Alderbury, though now a shadow of its former glory, held the stage where the tragedy unfolded, and Poirot intended to walk its boards. The estate appeared through a veil of mist, its Georgian manor house looming at the end of a neglected drive, its stone facade weathered and streaked with moss. The gardens, once meticulously tended, were a tangle of overgrown roses and brambles, their wildness a silent testament to years of abandonment. Poirot stepped from the car, his polished shoes sinking slightly into the damp earth, and surveyed the scene with the intensity of an artist studying a half-finished canvas. The air was sharp with the scent of wet leaves and salt from the nearby sea, and a chill wind whispered through the skeletal trees. He had arranged for a local caretaker to meet him, a wiry man named Hawkins who knew the estate's history and had agreed to guide Poirot through its grounds. "Monsieur Hawkins," Poirot greeted, his voice carrying the precise cadence of his Belgian origins, "I am Hercule Poirot, here to examine the place where Monsieur Amyas Crale died. You will show me the garden, the wall, the terrace, every detail, if you please." Hawkins, a man of few words with a face like weathered oak, nodded. "Aye, sir. It's a sad place now, but I remember it well enough from those days. Follow me." He led Poirot down a path overgrown with weeds, toward the garden where Amyas had painted his final masterpiece. The garden was a rectangular clearing bordered by a low stone wall, its surface pitted and draped with ivy. At one end, a crumbling terrace adjoined the house, its flagstones cracked but still intact. Hawkins pointed to a spot near the wall, where a patch of bare earth suggested the former site of an easel. "This is where Mr. Crale painted, sir. Right here, facing the sea. The table was just there, for his paints and such." He gestured to a spot a few feet away, where the ground was slightly flattened, as if memory had pressed it smooth. Poirot's eyes scanned the area, his mind reconstructing the scene from the witnesses' accounts. The table, you say, and the beer bottle, it was placed there. He stepped to the spot, his small frame moving with deliberate precision, as if measuring the space with his very presence. "Aye," Hawkins confirmed. "Mrs. Crale brought the beer out, set it on the table. I wasn't here that day, mind, but I heard the talk after. The police found the bottle right there, with her fingerprints." Poirot nodded, his mustache quivering slightly as he visualized the moment. He paced the distance from the easel to the table, 3 steps then to the terrace, perhaps 20 yards. The stone wall, draped with the ghosts of roses, formed a natural frame for the scene, with the sea glittering faintly in the distance. He turned to Hawkins. "And the laboratory of Monsieur Meredith Blake, where is it?" Hawkins pointed to a copse of trees beyond the garden. "Through there, sir, not far, a stone shed tucked away. Mr. Meredith used to spend hours in it, mixing his potions." He led Poirot along a narrow path, the ground soft with fallen leaves, until they reached a low building, its door warped but still sturdy. The lock, Poirot noted, was rusted but functional, suggesting it had once been secure. Inside, the laboratory was a relic of Meredith's obsessions, shelves lined with dusty vials, a workbench scattered with faded notebooks, and a faint chemical temps lingering in the air. Poirot's eyes swept the room, noting the small safe in one corner, its door ajar. "The conning it was kept here?" he asked. Hawkins shrugged. "So they said. Mr. Meredith was careless, folk reckoned. Anyone could have got in, if they knew how to pick a lock or find a key." His voice held no judgment, only the weariness of one who had seen too many tragedies. Poirot's fingers tapped lightly on his stick, a rhythm to his thoughts. He returned to the garden, retracing his steps to the easel spot, then to the table, and finally to the terrace. Each witness had described the day: Caroline delivering the beer, Amias drinking, Elsa posing, and the others scattered Philip on the terrace. Meredith in his laboratory, Angela and Miss Williams elsewhere. Yet Elsa's brief solitude with the bottle was a constant, a detail that shimmered like a flaw in a jewel. Poirot closed his eyes, letting the scene form in his mind, the sun high, the garden alive with color, the tension crackling beneath the surface. He turned to the terrace, climbing its shallow steps to stand where Philip and Miss Williams had been. The view of the garden was clear, the easel and table visible, though partially obscured by foliage. From here, one could see movements but not fine details. Scarf adjusted, a bottle touched. Poirot's gaze shifted to the path leading to the laboratory, a mere minute's walk. The poison, he mused, could have been taken by anyone with access. But the bottle's fingerprints only. Caroline suggested a deliberate act, a staging to mislead. Poirot descended to the garden. Pausing by the stone wall, he imagined Amias, vibrant and reckless, painting Elsa's portrait, oblivious to the currents of jealousy and betrayal swirling around him. Caroline, her dignity a fragile shield, bringing the beer. Elsa, radiant and calculating, alone with the bottle for a moment. The others, each with their own motives: Philip's possessive loyalty, Meredith's quiet adoration of Caroline, Angela's youthful rage, Miss Williams's detached observation. The scene was a tableau, each figure frozen in their role. Yet one had moved to poison the beer, to shatter the picture. "Monsieur Hawkins," Poirot said, turning to the caretaker, "you were not here that day, but you knew the household. Tell me, was there talk of discord, of secrets?" Hawkins scratched his chin, his eyes distant. "Plenty of talk, sir. Mr. Crale was a charmer, but he stirred trouble with that young lady, Miss Greer. Mrs. Crale, she kept her head high, but you could see the hurt. The village folk whispered said she'd not stand for it forever. Mr. Philip was always about, like a shadow to Mr. Crale, And Mr. Meredith, he'd look at Mrs. Crale like she was an angel. Miss Angela was a wild one, always kicking up a fuss. And the governess, Miss Williams, she saw everything, said little. He paused, his voice lowering. After the murder, folks said Mrs. Crale did it out of jealousy. But I always wondered, it seemed too neat, her fingerprints and all. Poirot's eyes gleamed, catching the caretaker's doubt. Too neat, you say? An interesting observation. The truth, monsieur, is rarely so tidy. He thanked Hawkins, dismissing him with a nod, and stood alone in the garden, the wind stirring his coat. The detective paced slowly, his mind weaving the witnesses' stories into a single thread. The bottle was the key, its fingerprints a deliberate clue. Caroline's touch was innocent. She had carried it from the cellar, but someone else, Poirot suspected, had ensured only her prints remained. Elsa's proximity, noted by all, was too consistent to be chance. Had she wiped the bottle clean, knowing Caroline's prints were already there? The laboratory, so close, offered opportunity to anyone with intent. Yet Meredith's guilt and Caroline's knowledge of the poison had made her the perfect scapegoat. Poirot's little gray cells hummed with activity. The garden was more than a crime scene. It was a stage where human passions, love, envy, betrayal had played out. Elsa's ambition, Philip's loyalty, Meredith's remorse, Angela's devotion, and Miss Williams's clarity each pointed to a truth hidden in plain sight. The poison, slow acting, could have been added before Caroline's delivery, during Elsa's moment alone. The fingerprints, Poirot mused, were not evidence of guilt, but a trap set by a cunning hand as the sun dipped below the hills. Casting long shadows across the garden, Poirot turned back to the house. He would summon the witnesses for a final reckoning, to confront them with the inconsistencies their memories had revealed. The nursery rhyme, he thought, had guided him well. This little piggy cried wee wee wee, and Miss Williams's sharp eyes had brought him closer to the truth. But it was here, in the garden of suspicion, that the pieces began to align, forming a picture only Hercule Poirot could complete. He hailed his car, his mind already planning the confrontation. The truth, he knew, was a delicate flower, blooming only for those who tended it with care. And Poirot, with his little gray cells, was its most diligent gardener. Chapter 8. The Motive of the Heart. The London fog had settled like a heavy curtain over the city as Hercule Poirot sat in his immaculate flat, the glow of a single lamp illuminating the polished surfaces of his desk. The air was thick with the scent of his tisane, its steam curling upward in delicate spirals, a counterpoint to the restless churn of his thoughts. The 5 witnesses, Philip Blake, Meredith Blake, Elsa Greer, Angela Warren, and Miss Williams, had each offered their version of the summer of 1926 at Alderbury, their memories weaving a tapestry of love, jealousy, and betrayal around the murder of Amias Crale. Poirot's visit to the abandoned estate had grounded their accounts in the physical reality of the garden, the stone wall, the table where the poisoned beer bottle stood. One detail persisted, a thread running through every narrative: Elsa Greer, alone with the bottle for a fleeting moment. This, coupled with the absence of her fingerprints and the presence of Caroline's, stirred Poirot's little gray cells into a frenzy. Now, he sat alone, piecing together the motives that drove each player in this tragedy, seeking the heart of the crime. Poirot's fingers traced the rim of his cup, his eyes half closed as he summoned the faces of the witnesses. Philip Blake, the loyal friend, had painted Caroline as a jealous wife. His disdain for her palpable, yet his devotion to Amias bordered on obsession. Could such loyalty mask a deeper resentment, perhaps toward Amias's preoccupation with Elsa? Meredith Blake, the chemist, carried the weight of his unsecured conian, his admiration for Caroline tinged with a quiet longing. Had his guilt blinded him to another's actions? Elsa Greer, now Lady Didisham, exuded confidence, her beauty a weapon, her love for Amias possessive and unyielding. Her proximity to the bottle, noted by all, suggested opportunity, but her motive securing Amias's love required scrutiny. Angela Warren, the fiery sister, defended Caroline with a passion born of loyalty. Yet her recollection of an argument hinted at Caroline's breaking point. Miss Williams, the detached governess, saw everything with a clarity unclouded by emotion. Her observation of Elsa's moment with the bottle, a critical piece of the puzzle. The detective rose, pacing the room with measured steps, his mind mapping the relationships like a chessboard. Amias Crale, the charismatic artist, was the center, his recklessness a catalyst for conflict. Caroline, his wife, endured his infidelity with a dignity that masked her pain, but did it conceal a capacity for murder? Elsa, the young mistress, stood to gain Amias's devotion if Caroline were removed, her ambition a potent motive. Philip's loyalty, Meredith's unspoken love, Angela's protectiveness, and Miss Williams's restraint each added a layer to the drama. But none, Poirot sensed, held the full truth alone. He paused by the window, the fog pressing against the glass like a conspirator's breath. The beer bottle was the fulcrum of the crime, its fingerprints only Caroline's a deliberate clue. The poison, cognaine, was slow-acting, allowing the murderer to act before Caroline's delivery, perhaps during Elsa's brief solitude with the bottle. The absence of other fingerprints suggested a calculated act. The bottle wiped clean, leaving only Caroline's traces from when she carried it from the cellar. Poirot's mustache twitched as he considered the implications. The murderer had not only poisoned Amias, but staged the scene to implicate Caroline, exploiting her vulnerability as the betrayed wife. Elsa Greer emerged as the most compelling suspect. Her love for Amias, described by all as intense, was laced with desperation. Philip had hinted at Amias's indecision. Elsa herself admitted his reluctance to leave Caroline, and Angela's account of the household's tension underscored Elsa's frustration. Had she, in a moment of rage or calculation, decided to remove the obstacle to her future? The laboratory, a short walk from the garden, offered access to the cognaine, and Elsa's knowledge of its presence, acknowledged by all, was undeniable. Her moment alone with the bottle, confirmed by every witness, provided the opportunity to add the poison and wipe the bottle clean, ensuring Caroline's fingerprints stood alone. Yet Poirot's mind, ever cautious, tested other possibilities. Philip's devotion to Amias could have twisted into jealousy, perhaps over Elsa's influence or Amias's neglect. His presence on the terrace gave him a view of the garden, but no witness placed him near the bottle. Meredith's guilt over the cognaine suggested negligence, but his love for Caroline made him an unlikely culprit. Why frame the woman he admired? Angela, young and impulsive, had resented Amias, but her loyalty to Caroline was fierce, and her youth made premeditated murder improbable. Miss Williams, with her sharp eyes, had no apparent motive, her role, that of an observer rather than a player. Poirot returned to his desk, his fingers drumming a soft rhythm as he considered the human heart. Jealousy, he knew, was a fire that could consume reason, but so too was love, ambition, or betrayal. Elsa's motive was the strongest: to possess Amias entirely, to eliminate Caroline's hold. Her confidence, her cold disdain for Caroline, suggested a woman capable of such an act. Yet her polished demeanor hinted at a mind adept at concealment. The argument Angela overheard Caroline's threat to make Amias sorry had been the prosecution's cornerstone. But Poirot suspected it was a red herring, a moment of anger exploited to seal Caroline's fate. He opened his notebook, its pages filled with neat, precise notes, and reviewed the timeline. The beer was brought by Caroline at noon, placed on the table, and drunk by Amias shortly after. Elsa's moment alone came when Amias stepped away to fetch paints, a window of opportunity lasting a minute or two. The poison's slow action meant it could have been added then, its effects delayed until Amias's collapse an hour later. The fingerprints, Poirot mused, were the murderer's masterstroke, a detail that turned suspicion toward Caroline while shielding the true culprit. Poirot's eyes gleamed as he closed the notebook. The motive of the heart was clear, but the proof lay in the interplay of these accounts. The subtle discrepancies that revealed intent. Elsa's consistent presence near the bottle, her absence of fingerprints, and her possessive love for Amia formed a pattern too deliberate to ignore. Yet he would not rush to judgment. The truth, he knew, required a final act, a confrontation where the witnesses' stories would be tested, their reactions observed. He would summon them to Carla Lamarchand's home, to lay bare the puzzle and watch for the crack in the facade. As the fog thickened outside, Poirot sipped his tisane, its warmth a contrast to the chill of the case. The nursery rhyme had guided him through the 5 perspectives, each pig revealing a facet of the truth. Now, in the quiet of his flat, he saw the shape of the crime. A murder born of ambition, staged with cunning, and hidden by the chaos of human emotions. Elsa Greer, he suspected, was the hand behind the poison, but suspicion was not proof. He would need to orchestrate the final scene with care, to draw out the confession that would free Caroline's memory and bring peace to her daughter. Poirot rose, his small frame filled with purpose. The motive of the heart had illuminated the path, but the truth, like a star in the fog, awaited his final step. He would return to Carla, arrange the gathering, and let his little gray cells complete their work. The garden of suspicion, he thought, would soon yield its secrets to Hercule Poirot. Chapter 9. The Poisoned Truth. The late November gloom hung over London, the city shrouded in a mist that mirrored the tangled web of truths and half-truths Hercule Poirot had unraveled. In his meticulously ordered flat, the detective prepared for the final act of his investigation into the murder of Amias Crale 16 years ago. The 5 witnesses, Philip Blake, Meredith Blake, Elsa Greer, Angela Warren, and Miss Williams, had each painted a vivid picture of that summer at Alderbury, their accounts converging on a single, damning detail. Elsa Greer, alone with the poisoned beer bottle for a fleeting moment. Poirot's visit to the estate had grounded their stories, revealing the garden as a stage where jealousy and ambition played out. The absence of Elsa's fingerprints, the presence of Caroline's, and the slow-acting nature of the Conian pointed to a calculated act, one Poirot now believed was orchestrated by the radiant mistress who sought to claim Amias entirely. Today, he would confront the witnesses, weaving their narratives into a net to catch the truth. Carla Lamarchand had arranged for the gathering at her modest but elegant London townhouse, its drawing room warmed by a crackling fire that cast flickering shadows on the walls. The witnesses arrived one by one, their expressions a mix of curiosity, unease, and, in some cases, defiance. Philip Blake, his silver hair gleaming, sat stiffly, his eyes narrow with skepticism. Meredith Blake, hunched and nervous, clutched a handkerchief, his gaze darting to the others. Elsa Greer, now Lady Didisham, entered with the poise of a queen, her golden hair catching the firelight, her smile cool but guarded. Angela Warren, tanned and intense, stood by the window, her arms crossed, her loyalty to her sister a palpable force. Miss Williams, erect and severe, took a chair near the door, her sharp eyes missing nothing. Carla, pale but resolute, welcomed Poirot with a nod, her hope tempered by apprehension. Poirot stood before them, his small frame commanding the room, his mustache impeccable as ever. Madame et messieurs, he began, his voice clear and precise, I thank you for coming. Mademoiselle Lamarchand has tasked me, Hercule Poirot, with uncovering the truth of Amias Crale's death. You have each shared your memories of that summer at Alderbury, and now, together, we shall see the picture they form. The truth, it is like a mosaic, each piece alone is incomplete, but together, it reveals all. Philip shifted, his voice sharp. This is a waste of time, Poirot. Caroline poisoned Amias. The police proved it: fingerprints, motive, everything. Why drag us through it again? Poirot's eyes gleamed, his smile enigmatic. The police, Monsieur Blake, see what is presented. I see what is hidden. Let us begin with the scene. The garden at Alderbury, a warm August day. Ami is painting Mademoiselle Greer by the stone wall. A table nearby holds his supplies and a bottle of beer, brought by Madame Crale. Within an hour, he is dead, poisoned by coniine from Monsieur Meredith Blake's laboratory. The bottle bears only Madame Crale's fingerprints. A simple case. N'est-ce pas? Yet simplicity. It can be a mask. Meredith's hands twisted his handkerchief, his voice low. I've never forgiven myself for that poison. If I'd locked it better. Perhaps. Poirot raised a hand, silencing him gently. Guilt, Monsieur Blake, clouds the vision. Let us examine the day. Madame Crale brings the beer at noon, places it on the table, and departs. Monsieur Crale drinks, continues painting. Mademoiselle Greer, you were posing, yes. But there was a moment when Monsieur Crale stepped away to fetch paints. Perhaps Elsa's eyes narrowed, her voice cool. Yes, he did. I stayed by the easel, adjusting my scarf. What of it? Her tone was defiant, but her fingers tightened on her purse. Gaze swept the room, his voice soft but relentless. What of it? All of you. Everyone. Place Mademoiselle Greer near the table, alone with the bottle, during this moment. Monsieur Philip, you saw her from the terrace. Monsieur Meredith, you noted her adjusting her scarf. Mademoiselle Angela, you saw her by the table as you passed. Mademoiselle Williams, your sharp eyes caught her lingering near the bottle. A coincidence, perhaps. But Hercule Poirot does not believe in coincidences. Angela's head snapped up, her voice fierce. Are you saying Elsa did it? Caroline was innocent. I've always said so. Elsa's laugh was sharp, cutting through the tension. This is absurd, Monsieur Poirot. I loved Amias. Why would I kill him? Caroline was the jealous one. Her fingerprints were on the bottle, her motive clear. You're chasing shadows. Poirot's mustache quivered, a sign of his mind at work. Shadows, Lady Didisham. No, I chased the truth. The coniine, it is slow acting, yes. It could have been added before Madame Crale brought the beer, or during that moment you were alone. The fingerprints only Madame Crale's suggest a deliberate act. The bottle was wiped clean, leaving only her traces from carrying it. A clever touch, n'est-ce pas? To make the betrayed wife the perfect culprit. Miss Williams's voice, crisp and measured, broke the silence. You suggest someone framed Mrs. Crale? That the poison was placed to implicate her? Poirot nodded, his eyes fixed on Elsa. Precisement. Let us consider motive. Madame Crale, she loved her husband, despite his infidelity. Her pain was real, but murder. It does not fit her dignity, her restraint. You, Lady Didisham, loved Monsieur Crale, with a passion that demanded all. He spoke of leaving Madame Crale, yet he hesitated. Did this not frustrate you, a woman of such ambition? Elsa's composure cracked, her eyes flashing. Frustrate. I was young, in love. I believed in us. Caroline took him from me. She poisoned him. You have no proof otherwise. Her voice rose, a tremor betraying her. Poirot's voice remained calm, a velvet blade. Proof. The proof is in your stories, Mies Amos. Each of you saw Mademoiselle Greer near the bottle, yet her fingerprints were absent. Why? Because she wiped it clean, knowing Madame Crale's prints were there. The laboratory, a short walk away, held the coniine, known to all. You, Lady Didisham, were aware of it, as you admitted. You had opportunity, motive, and the cunning. To stage the scene? Philip stood, his face flushed. This is outrageous. You're accusing Elsa based on what her adjusting a scarf. Caroline was the jealous one, everyone saw it. Meredith's voice was soft, trembling. But could it be true? I always wondered why Caroline would do such a thing. She wasn't like that. Angela's eyes blazed, fixed on Elsa. You did it, didn't you? You framed her, let her die. In prison. She took a step forward, restrained only by Carla's gentle hand on her arm. Elsa's face was pale now, her poise unraveling. You're mad, all of you. I loved Aeneas. I'd never harm him. But her voice shook, her eyes darting to the door. Poirot stepped closer, his presence commanding. Love, Lady Didisham, can be a poison as deadly as coniine. You wanted Aeneas, but he would not leave his wife. In that moment, alone with the bottle, you saw your chance to remove the obstacle. To frame Madame Crale, you took the poison from the laboratory, added it to the beer, and wiped the bottle clean. A simple act, but one that destroyed a family. The room was silent, the fires crackled the only sound. Elsa's eyes met Poirot's, and for a moment they held a battle of wills. Then, with a shudder, she sank into her chair, her hands covering her face. I couldn't lose him, she whispered, her voice breaking. He said he'd stay with her, that it was duty, I thought. If she was gone, he'd be mine. I took the coniine, just a little, from Meredith's lab. I didn't mean for it to go so far. Her words dissolved into a sob, the confession tearing through the room like a storm. Carla gasped, tears streaming down her face. My mother, she was innocent. Angela rushed to her, embracing her tightly. I knew it, Carla. I knew she didn't do it. Philip sat heavily, his face ashen. My God, all these years. Meredith's handkerchief was a crumpled mess, his eyes wet. I should have locked it better. I'm so sorry, Carla. Miss Williams nodded, her expression grim but satisfied. The truth, Monsieur Poirot, as you promised. Poirot's voice was somber, his eyes fixed on Elsa. The truth, it is a heavy burden, Lady Didisham. You have carried it 16 years, and now it is laid bare. He turned to Carla. Mademoiselle, your mother's honor is restored. The law may decide Lady Didisham's fate, but the truth, it is yours. Carla nodded, her voice choked. Thank you, Monsieur Poirot. For her, for me. Poirot bowed slightly, his work complete. The nursery rhyme had led him to the truth, each pig revealing a piece of the puzzle. As the witnesses dispersed, their faces heavy with the weight of revelation, Poirot felt no triumph, only the quiet satisfaction of justice served. The poisoned truth, hidden so long, had bloomed. At last, in the garden of suspicion. Chapter 10. The Confession. The London townhouse of Carla Lamarchand stood silent in the aftermath of Elsa Greer's confession, the air heavy with the weight of a truth 16 years buried. The fire in the drawing room had dwindled to embers, its faint glow casting long shadows across the faces of those gathered. Philip Blake, Meredith Blake, Angela Warren, Miss Williams, and Elsa, now Lady Didisham, whose poised facade had crumbled into raw, tear-streaked vulnerability. Hercule Poirot stood at the center, his small frame a beacon of calm authority, his sharp green eyes softened by a somber understanding of the human cost before him. Carla, her face pale but resolute, clutched Angela's hand, her mother's innocence finally vindicated. The nursery rhyme that had guided Poirot's investigation, this little piggy went to market, this little piggy stayed home, had led him to this moment, where the final piece of the puzzle, the poisoned truth, lay bare. Poirot's voice, measured and precise, broke the silence. Madame et messieurs, the truth, it is a mirror that reflects not only what was done but why. Lady Didisham, you have confessed to the murder of Aeneas Crale, an act born of a love that turned to desperation. But I would hear the full account, if you please, so that Mademoiselle Lamarchand may have peace, and the past may be laid to rest. Elsa raised her head, her golden hair disheveled, her eyes red but defiant. "You've got what you wanted, Poirot," she said, her voice hoarse but steady. "Why make me relive it? I've admitted it. I killed him. Isn't that enough?" Her hands trembled, clutching the arms of her chair as if anchoring herself against a storm. Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of his relentless pursuit. "It is not enough, Lady Didisham. The truth. It is not merely the act, but the heart behind it. Speak, and let the burden be shared." Elsa's gaze darted to the other's: Philip's stunned disbelief, Meredith's quiet grief, Angela's burning anger, Miss Williams's unyielding scrutiny, and Carla's tearful hope. She drew a shuddering breath, her voice low and raw. "Very well. I loved Aeneas more than I'd ever loved anyone. He was my world, his art, his passion, the way he saw me. I was 20, naive, believing we'd be together forever. He said he loved me, that he'd leave Caroline, but every time I pressed him, he'd hesitate. Duty, he called it. Duty to her, to their life, to that child." Her lips curled, a flicker of disdain for Carla, quickly masked. Carla flinched, but Angela squeezed her hand, her eyes never leaving Elsa. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "Continue, Lady Didisham." Elsa's hands twisted in her lap, her voice gaining strength. "That summer at Alderbury, I saw it clearly. Caroline would never let him go. She'd hold him with her quiet strength, her martyr's patience. I hated her for it, for standing in my way. I heard her arguing with him the night before, threatening to make him sorry. It gave me the idea." She paused, her eyes distant, as if seeing the garden again. "Meredith's laboratory was no secret. I'd heard him talk about his poisons, his cocaine. I went there one evening, when everyone was at dinner. The lock was flimsy, slipped in, found the vial, took just enough. I didn't want to kill him, not at first. I thought, maybe a small dose, to make him ill, to scare Caroline, to make her leave." Meredith gasped, his handkerchief falling to the floor. "My God, Elsa, you took it from my lab." "I never thought." Poirot raised a hand, silencing him. "And the beer, Lady Didisham, how did it come to pass?" Elsa's voice dropped, almost a whisper. "The next day, Aeneas was painting me in the garden. Caroline brought the beer, set it on the table, and left. I saw my chance when Aeneas stepped away to mix paints. I was alone, just for a moment. I poured the cognac into the bottle, stirred it with my scarf to mix it. Then I wiped the bottle clean every inch, knowing Caroline's fingerprints were already there from carrying it. I thought it would look like her doing. I didn't mean for him to die, not really. I thought it would just make him sick, that he'd turn to me, that Caroline would be blamed and sent away." Her voice broke, tears spilling down her cheeks. "But he drank, and an hour later, he was gone. I watched him collapse, and I knew I'd gone too far." Angela's voice was a low growl. "You let my sister take the blame. You let her die. In prison." She took a step forward, restrained by Carla's grip. Elsa's head snapped up, her eyes flashing. "I was terrified. I didn't expect him to die. When the police found Caroline's fingerprints, it was too easy, they believed. She was jealous that she'd snapped. I couldn't come forward. I was young, scared. I told myself it was her fault for holding on to him." Her voice faltered, the defiance crumbling. "But I've carried it every day since." Philip's face was ashen, his voice barely audible. You killed Aeneas. All these years, I thought." He trailed off, his hands clenching into fists. Miss Williams's voice cut through, sharp and precise. "You exploited Mrs. Crale's vulnerability, Miss Greer. You used her love for him to destroy her." Her eyes were cold, unyielding. Carla's voice was soft, trembling. "My mother, she suffered, and you lived free, married, titled. How could you?" Elsa's shoulders slumped, her beauty diminished by guilt. I didn't mean for it to end like this. I loved him. I thought I was saving us. But after, I couldn't undo it. I tried to forget, to build a new life. But it followed me, always. Her voice was a whisper now, broken. Poirot stepped forward, his presence commanding the room. The heart, Lady Didisham, it can lead us to great folly. You sought to possess Amias Crale, but in your act, you lost him and destroyed an innocent woman. The truth, it is now yours to bear before the law. He turned to Carla, his voice gentle. Mademoiselle, your mother's name is cleared. The confession, it is complete. Carla nodded, tears streaming down her face. Thank you, Monsieur Poirot. She can rest now. I can rest. Poirot's eyes softened, but his tone remained firm. I shall prepare a report for the authorities, detailing Lady Didisham's confession and the evidence of the witnesses' accounts. The law, it will decide her fate, but the truth, it is yours, Mademoiselle le Marchant. Angela embraced Carla, her own tears falling. We did it, Carla, for her. Meredith rose, his face etched with sorrow. I'm so sorry, Carla, if I'd been more careful. Carla shook her head, her voice steady, despite her tears. It's not your fault, Meredith. You couldn't have known. Philip stood abruptly, his voice choked. I need air. He strode to the door, his shoulders hunched, as if the weight of his misplaced loyalty had broken him. Miss Williams remained seated, her expression grim but satisfied. Justice, Monsieur Poirot, is a slow but certain wheel. You have turned it well. Elsa rose, her movements unsteady, as if the confession had drained her. What happens now? She asked, her voice barely audible. Poirot's gaze was steady, without malice. You will face the authorities, Lady Didisham. The truth, it is no longer yours to hide. He gestured to the door, where the butler waited to escort her out. As Elsa left, supported by the butler, the room fell silent, the fire's embers casting a faint glow. Poirot turned to Carla, bowing slightly. Mademoiselle, the task is complete. Your mother's honor is restored, and you may find peace. Carla's eyes met his, filled with gratitude. I don't know how to thank you, Monsieur Poirot. You've given me my mother back. Poirot's smile was somber. The truth, mademoiselle, is its own reward. But for you, it is a gift to carry forward. He gathered his coat and stick, preparing to leave. His work done as he stepped into the foggy London night, the weight of the case lingered. The nursery rhyme had guided him through the 5 voices, each revealing a piece of the tragedy. Elsa's confession, born of a love twisted into desperation, had closed the circle, but the cost Caroline's life. Carla's loss, the fractured lives of the witnesses remained. Poirot's little grey cells, ever restless, had found the truth, but it was a truth that brought no joy, only the quiet satisfaction of justice served. Chapter 11. The verdict of time. The fog that cloaked London had lifted slightly, leaving a chill dampness in the air as Hercule Poirot sat at his desk, the lamplight casting a warm glow over the orderly expanse of his flat. The confession of Elsa Greer, now Lady Didisham, still echoed in his mind. A stark revelation that had shattered the illusion of Caroline Crale's guilt and restored her honor in the eyes of her daughter, Carla. The confrontation at Carla's townhouse had been a crucible, forging truth from the raw material of memory, yet it left Poirot with a sense of solemn duty. The case was not yet closed. The truth, though uncovered, required documentation, a final act to ensure justice could follow its course. His little grey cells, ever meticulous, now turned to the task of weaving the witnesses' accounts and Elsa's confession into a report that would stand as a testament to Caroline's innocence. Poirot opened his notebook, its pages filled with precise, elegant script, and began to draft the report. He detailed the summer of 1926 at Alderbury, drawing from the vivid accounts of Philip Blake's loyalty, Meredith Blake's guilt, Elsa Greer's ambition. Angela Warren's devotion, and Miss Williams's clarity. Each had placed Elsa near the poisoned beer bottle, a fact corroborated by their collective memories and Poirot's own observations at the estate. The absence of Elsa's fingerprints, the presence of Caroline's, and the slow-acting nature of the conian pointed to a deliberate act of framing, a plan executed with cold precision. Elsa's confession, her desperate love for Amyas, her theft of the poison from Meredith's laboratory, her calculated act of wiping the bottle clean formed the cornerstone of the document. Poirot's pen moved swiftly, each word chosen with care, ensuring the report was as unassailable as the truth itself. He paused, sipping his tisane, its warmth a comfort against the chill of the task. The legal outcome, he knew, was uncertain. 16 years had passed, and the wheels of justice turned slowly, if at all, for a crime so old. Elsa, now a titled lady, might evade prosecution, her confession complicated by time and the lack of physical evidence beyond the witness's words. Yet for Carla, the truth was enough a vindication of her mother's memory, a chance to heal the wounds of a childhood shadowed by doubt. Poirot's duty was to provide her with this closure, to ensure the world knew Caroline Crale was innocent. The detective rose, pacing the room with measured steps, his mind replaying the confrontation. Philip Blake's stunned disbelief had given way to a quiet unraveling, his certainty in Caroline's guilt exposed as a shield for his own loyalty to Amyas. Meredith Blake, haunted by his negligence, had found some relief in knowing his error was not the sole cause of Caroline's fate, though his sorrow remained. Angela Warren's fierce vindication had softened into gratitude, her bond with Carla strengthened by their shared loss. Miss Williams, ever the observer, had nodded with grim approval, her faith in justice affirmed. And Elsa, her confession had stripped away her polished exterior, revealing a woman broken by the weight of her own actions, her tears not of remorse, but of defeat. Poirot returned to his desk, adding a final paragraph to the report. He noted the emotional toll on the witnesses, their lives altered by the revelation. Philip, he wrote, would grapple with his misplaced blame, perhaps seeking redemption in his own way. Meredith's guilt might ease, allowing him to reclaim a measure of peace. Angela's loyalty, proven true, would anchor her as she supported Carla. Miss Williams, detached yet principled, would carry on, her role in the truth's unveiling a quiet triumph. Elsa, he concluded, would face the judgment of her conscience, if not the law. Her title and wealth no shield against the past. He sealed the report in an envelope, addressing it to Carla, with instructions to share it with her solicitor. The document, he knew, was more than evidence. It was a legacy for Caroline, a gift to her daughter. Poirot's thoughts turned to Carla. Her dark eyes filled with hope and pain during their first meeting. She had sought him out, trusting his little gray cells to unravel a tragedy that had defined her life. Now she could move forward, her mother's name cleared, her heart unburdened, as he prepared to dispatch the report. A knock at the door announced Carla's arrival. She entered, her face still pale, but her posture lighter, as if a weight had lifted. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice steady, "I wanted to see you before I leave for Canada. The solicitor has the confession, and he's hopeful we can clear my mother's name officially. I can't thank you enough." Poirot rose, bowing slightly. "Mademoiselle, the truth is its own reward, but your gratitude, it warms the heart of Hercule Poirot. Your mother, she was a woman of great strength, and now the world may know it." Carla's eyes glistened, but she smiled. "I'm going to visit her grave when I return. I want to tell her she's free, that we did this for her." She paused, her voice softening. "And Angelucci's coming with me. We'll rebuild what we can." Poirot nodded, his expression somber but kind. "You have each other, mademoiselle, and that is a strength greater than any tragedy. Go with peace." As Carla left, Poirot returned to his chair, the room silent, save for the ticking of a clock. The nursery rhyme had guided him through the 5 pigs, their voices revealing the truth of Amias Crale's death. The verdict of time, he mused, was not in the hands of courts, but in the hearts of those who carried the past. Caroline's memory was restored, Carla's burden lifted. And the witnesses, each in their way, would face their revised truths. For Poirot, the case was a testament to the power of the little gray cells, a reminder that no secret could withstand their scrutiny. He sipped his tisane, his eyes half closed, the satisfaction of a puzzle solved tempered by the human cost. The garden of suspicion had yielded its truth, and the verdict of time, though delayed, was just. Hercule Poirot, ever the servant of truth, turned his thoughts to the next challenge, ready to meet it with the same relentless clarity. Chapter 12. The little grey cell's winter's chill had settled over London. The city wrapped in a grey mantle of frost and fog as Hercule Poirot sat by the fire in his pristine flat. The embers glowed softly, casting a warm light across the polished surfaces of his desk, where a single cup of tisane steamed, its herbal scent a quiet comfort. The case of Amias Crale's murder, 16 years cold, had reached its resolution. Elsa Greer's confession, drawn from the crucible of confrontation, had exonerated Caroline Crale, restoring her honor in the eyes of her daughter, Carla le Marchant. The report Poirot had prepared, meticulous and unassailable, was now in the hands of Carla's solicitor, a testament to the truth that would, he hoped, clear Caroline's name in the annals of justice. Yet, as Poirot gazed into the fire, his sharp green eyes reflective, he felt no triumph, only the somber satisfaction of a puzzle solved, tempered by the weight of human frailty. The nursery rhyme, "This little piggy went to market," had been his guide, each witness a pig offering a piece of the mosaic. Philip Blake's fierce loyalty to Amias had blinded him to other truths, his disdain for Caroline a shield for his own devotion. Meredith Blake's guilt over his unsecured Conian had clouded his perception, his quiet love for Caroline a silent burden. Elsa Greer's ambition, cloaked in beauty, had driven her to poison and betrayal, her confession a crack in her polished armor. Angela Warren's loyalty to her sister had fueled her fierce defense, her memories sharp with the pain of youth. Miss Williams, the detached governess, had provided clarity, her observations a beacon in the fog of emotion. Together, their voices had led Poirot to the garden of suspicion, where the truth of Amias's death lay hidden in a single calculated act. Poirot rose, his small frame moving with deliberate grace as he crossed to the window. The fog pressed against the glass, a reminder of the shadows he had pierced. The case had been a delicate dance of motives, love, jealousy, ambition, each witness a player in a tragedy scripted by human passion. Elsa's act, born of a desperate desire to possess Amias, had been cunning. The stolen Conian, the wiped bottle, the exploitation of Caroline's fingerprints. Yet it was the consistency of the witnesses' account Celsus moment alone. With the beer that had unraveled her plan, Poirot's little grey cells, ever relentless, had found the pattern, the subtle discord in her polished narrative, and brought her to confession. He returned to his chair, sipping his tisane, its warmth grounding his thoughts. The verdict of time had been delivered, but its ripples would linger. Carla, now free to honor her mother's memory, would carry forward with a lighter heart, supported by Angela's steadfast presence. Philip, his certainties shattered, faced a reckoning with his own biases, perhaps to emerge humbler. Meredith, relieved of some guilt, might find peace in knowing his negligence was not the sole cause of Caroline's fate. Miss Williams, her faith in justice affirmed, would continue her quiet life, her role in the truth's unveiling a private victory. And Elsa, her title and wealth could not shield her from the consequences of her confession, whether legal or personal. The law, Poirot knew, might falter after so many years, but the court of conscience was unyielding. The detective's mind drifted to the broader canvas of human nature. The case had been a study in the heart's complexities, how love could twist into destruction, how loyalty could blind, how guilt could distort. Caroline Crale, a woman of quiet strength, had been the victim not only of murder, but of a world too quick to judge. Her dignity, her love for Amias, despite his betrayal, had been her legacy, now restored through Carla's faith and Poirot's persistence. The nursery rhyme, a whimsical framework, had proven apt. Each pig a voice in a chorus that sang of truth, delayed but not denied. Poirot set down his cup, his eyes gleaming with the quiet pride of a craftsman. The little gray cells, his greatest allies, had triumphed once more, unraveling a web woven by time and deception. Yet the victory was bittersweet. For the truth had come at the cost of lives, broken Caroline's, Amias's, and even Elsa's, whose love had been her undoing. Poirot's work was to illuminate, not to judge, and he took solace in knowing Carla could now face the future unburdened. As the fire crackled, Poirot's thoughts turned to the next challenge, the next puzzle, that awaited his scrutiny. The world he knew was full of mysteries, each a call to his relentless mind. He adjusted his mustache, its symmetry a reflection of his ordered soul, and smiled faintly. The little gray cells, ever vigilant, were ready. For Hercule Poirot, the pursuit of truth was not merely a profession, but a calling, and he would answer it, as always, with unwavering clarity.